Hello everyone, this is Jamal Thomas and welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Well, it's official. Donald Trump is the 45th President of the United States. So he had his inauguration today. He said, "From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. One by one, the factories shuttered and left our shores, with not even a thought of the millions and millions of American workers that were left behind. The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their homes and then distributed all across the world. But that is in the past, and now we're looking only to the future." Okay, let me read this one last part, and we can unpack the rest of it. "Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge." Such a goofball. "And crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. The American carnage stops here. It stops right now. We're one nation, and their pain is our pain." All right, let's unpack this a little bit. So, for the first part, one by one, the factories shuttered and left our shores without even a thought of the millions and millions of American workers that were left behind. That's true. That's a true statement. It's probably one of the first true statements I've heard from Donald Trump. "The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their homes and redistributed across the world." That's also true. Democrats fundamentally miss that he was talking about the economy during the campaign. And it struck a chord for a reason. It's true. This part is true. Now, it's a second question on whether or not he's going to do anything about it, and whether his policies are going to address it. But at the very least, it's a definition of what's going on. The second part is a little more disturbing to me. "Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscapes of our nation, an education system flush with cash, but which leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of all knowledge. And the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential." So the first part is dealing with the education system is flush with cash. The education system is not flush with cash. People are policy. And Trump put up Betsy Du Bois for education secretary. She's essentially a billionaire that, at least by the hearing standpoint, was not all that bright and had no experience whatsoever dealing with education. Her only experience was getting money to push programs like charter schools, effectively taking government money and giving it to a private enterprise. And understand, this is a thought experiment. You get $10,000. That $10,000 is a block amount that you can give for education. I give that money to a public school. The public school, for the most part, uses the majority of that money to the service of whatever it's doing. Meaning, most of the costs and everything else, for the most part, there's a small overhead in regards to administrative costs. For the most part, it is going towards the program itself. When you give it to a private enterprise, they're going to take some off the top to pay whoever's in charge of that private enterprise, which means the rest of the money is going to go for, yes, administrative stuff, but also for profit. So what are you going to do? You've already taken a huge chunk to pay to the person at the top. Are you going to pay the other people who are in that facility less? Or is the government going to have to pay more? You can't have it both ways. And what makes it so bad, it's not even, they don't get better outcomes. There aren't better outcomes using charter schools. It's just dumping money into private enterprise. That's If I had to wager, that's what I put my money on. The whole flush with cash. It's full of it. And the crime and the gangs and the drugs that have stolen too many lives. So this one is more disturbing to me. Donald Trump has been pushing this, we're tired of this anti-cop thing. This authoritarian, fascist, dictatorship-esque rhetoric. Being a cop is safer than being a garbage man. Literally. And if you guys are really concerned about the sentiment of people being against cops, stop murdering people. That'll stop it almost overnight. I mean, look, you're just not trusted. Oftentimes, you guys are just as bad, if not worse, than the criminals that the person has to deal with. You are not working on the good side. I'm sorry, most of the time you're not. And the Justice Department reports and everything else that came out showed racial bias, abuse of authority, in one case, death threats. There is no anti-cop. At the very least, no undeserved anti-cop rhetoric. And any idea of putting stop and frisk and everything else that he was talking about through the campaign, throughout the course, like all across the country. Yeah, man. I mean, look, would Jeff Sessions be the one to help push that through? I could see it. Yeah, I could see it. So what, it was ruled unconstitutional. American carnage stops here. Personally, I think that carnage is about to start. So of course, there were protests, some of which turned violent. This is reported from the Huffington Post. There were several tweets that showed people smashing windows at a Bank of America location, and a Starbucks was vandalized at the intersection of 13th Street and 1 Street. It was unclear who was doing the damage, but police released a statement calling them an organized group with the sole purpose of destroying property with crowbars, hammers, asps, about a mile away from the National Mall. 2 officers have been injured related to vandalism and destruction of property, and 95 arrests have been made at this point. Alright, let's keep it going. So some of the people, of course, they were shouting, protesting. One guy joked, said, "They can't arrest us all." Somebody else said, "Of course they can." So the guy felt the need to explain himself. He says, "They don't have the plastic handcuffs. They can beat the shit out of us, but they can't arrest us all." He's familiar with cops, apparently. Somebody else, this was another woman, she said, "The man is so vile regardless of his policies. I couldn't have voted for him," said Mary Lou Dickens, 68, who traveled to Washington from Cumberland, Maryland. She says, "I don't care what things he was going to offer me. He was such a soulless piece of shit that I wouldn't have voted for him anyway." One of the people who were there supporting Trump yelled out, "Get a job! Stop crying, snowflakes! Trump won." They had 3rd grade students, people holding signs. That was this really adorable one. Well, that's not the adorable one. "I am not worried my generation will overthrow this government." Oh, man. Look, I gotta be honest, it's weird, and I know everybody's jittery. I kind of want people to take a deep breath, though. I mean, there are 4 more years of this. And I think part of the apprehension is nobody knows what Trump is going to do. He's a wild card. And it doesn't necessarily help when he's making statements like this. And it's also a little bit strange to some degree, because he's mentioning something that's somewhat of the wheelhouse of the Democrats, but he's merging it with this weird right-wing sentiment about like law and order and all this other stuff. This is somewhat dangerous. I mean, I think this is dangerous from a few standpoints. One, Trump winning this election showed that people are willing to part with ideas of race, gender, those type of things, providing their economics are safe. Meaning, yeah, I am uncomfortable with him, talking about Muslims that way, but if he's going to bring jobs back, he may be okay. And because of that, some of the more edgier, more blatantly racist aspects of this make it normalized if he finds a way to actually bring some kind of level of economic improvement. That's my concern. And clearly, he can take them from Democrats, particularly if he's successful on that front. I'm going to slightly segue into another one, into another thought.